Greetings, I'm Daryl Labar, the creator of the CRM Early Bound Generator. You can find it at xrmearlyboundgenerator.codeplex.com. In this video, I'm going to go through uh, how to use the XRM Early Bound Generator and some of the features that are available for improving your development time. So first off, to download, there are two options: an execute with the XRM toolbox and DLLs for use with the XRM toolbox. The executable with the XRM toolbox includes all of the exe itself, and you can just be able to open that, unzip it, and run. The DLLs for use with the XRM toolbox is if you already have the toolbox downloaded and you're using it, and you just want to add the actual plugin itself. So I'm going to show you the difference between both of these right now. Go ahead and download them. Before you open them up, to right-click and go to Properties, Unblock, or else you're going to have issues with Windows security. Unblock both of them. Okay. In the full version, it contains my specific DLLs for this project, as well as all the minimum specific DLLs and exe for the XRM toolbox. The plugin only contains the files needed to add this plugin, to your existing XRM toolbox. So if you already have the XRM toolbox, you can go ahead and copy this whole thing and paste it into where you're currently using it. So I'm going to go ahead and extract this out here. Okay, here. For the full version, that's all I need to do, and open it, and you can start running. And I'm not going to go through and give the explanation of how to connect to CRM instance here or any of that kind of stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and jump to a version of the toolbox that I've already got open and already have connected. If you need help connecting to an instance of CRM, I'd refer to the XRM toolbox page for that. So anyway, let's go ahead and look at this. I'm going to minimize some of these things to get rid of some of this clutter. So here's the basic toolbox. I've already connected to my local VM, and now I can go ahead and choose what I want to do. And here are all the options, and don't get too confused because they're all listed on the actual home page here, and we'll go through them right now. So include command line output. When you generate these files by default, you don't get the actual command line used to generate them. With this checked, it'll specify whether to include the command line in the early bound class when it's generated. So if we look at one of the files that I've already generated, it's going to give the actual command line used to generate that file. And so if you ever wanted to run this manually, you can just copy that entire command line, put it in your run dialog, and run, and it'll generate the all of the entities exactly how you specified it without actually using the tool. The tool itself is just a wrapper around the Microsoft CRM Service Util exe. So it just calls that and adds in some plugins and puts a nice GUI over it for how it gets configured. Okay, so that's the first thing, the command line in output. Mask the password. It includes the password, and by default that's checked, so you don't have to worry about the password being visible if you check that into source control. This use TFF to check out files. It's pretty self-explanatory that it'll actually attempt to use the TFS to check out any files that you've got loaded. So in the path here, where you specify where the path goes, it'll attempt to see if you're using TFS, and if you are, it'll go ahead and see if the file has actually changed after it generates it. And if it has, it'll actually check it out for you. So you can go ahead and run the tool and wait for everybody to finish generating, and then you can look at your pending changes in Visual Studio to see what files have actually changed. So that's a really nice feature. Uh, that TFS is the only one I've currently implemented because that's the only one I've currently used. If someone else wants to add that, please let me know for a different provider. Okay, so that's the create. Okay, so the final one here is the namespace here. Whatever namespace you want to have included for your bound entities. Probably makes sense to have a company name, CRM entities of some sort. Use TFS to check out files. Then we have this create all button. Now the create all button will create at the same time an entities, the option sets, and the actions. It just spins up 3 new threads, each one opening up a new CRM service util.exe and generating those values. So if you want to generate all 3 rather than doing it synchronously, it's done asynchronously. It's a little bit faster. So we've done through the main section. Let's go ahead and look at the entities tabs. enum mappings. This will go ahead and specify an enum mapping from an option set property to an entity. And what that means is it's saying, okay, here are some values, here's the actual attribute, and here's the option set I want you to map to that attribute. This is useful when you actually look at the generate option set enum properties. This thing actually gives you early bound enums on your CRM entities rather than just the option set values. I find it highly beneficial, and I'll show you an example of that just in a little bit here. So we had enum mappings. If you needed to specify a map, you could do that. If you happen to have a couple old entities with local option sets, and then you've created a global option sets with the same exact int values, you could select this enum mappings and say, hey, I want all of these local ones to map to the global one, and that way you can actually use your compare operators just fine in Visual Studio without any issue. Entities to skip, pretty self-explanatory. Most of the time we don't need all the entities that CRM provides, and you can go through and select specific entities that you actually want to skip. Specify attribute names. This is helpful if you want to change the capitalization on the C# side for the attribute name. I find it very helpful in Visual Studio when I'm developing to use some shortcut keys for accessing variables. So if we look at the, zoom in a little bit farther so it's easier to see. So for example, ship to postal code. If you type in SH, you got all the ship, ST, the ship tos, and then if I want fax, F8, STF, which is all the capital letters, will give you exactly what you want. It doesn't make as much sense for something that's short. Something that long would be very helpful to type in STFT, STFT, CE. That's a quick little shortcut, and I find it helpful to be able to override some of the attribute names in order to enable that quick lookup. Okay. So that is the specify attribute names and unmapped properties. This is going to allow for the ability to specify option set value properties of an entity that doesn't have an enum mapping. I've used this in instances where I wanted to create my own manual mapping, and I just didn't want it to get mapped. So that's what that would be used for. Okay. Add debug non-user code. What that does, if you look at a generated entity here, it adds these attributes to all methods and all properties. And what that does is if you're F11ing, it won't step into this code if you have show only use user code in your debug. So debug options, enable just my code. If you have that enabled, it won't actually step into any of these properties. So if you're attempting to go through and look at a link statement or something, and you've got all these properties that you're using, you won't ever step into it. So that's a very helpful feature for debugging. Create one file per entity. By default, all of your entities are in a single file. That can get very, very large, which makes it very, very hard to see what has changed, what entities have changed. And also makes it hard for Visual Studio to load all that file if it's so large. So that splits it off into one file per entity, which is a really nice feature. Generate anonymous type constructors. So this is an example when you can't by default using link to CRM specify read-only properties to be returned. And I'll show you a quick example of what I'm talking about there, but that basically just creates a new constructor on the entities towards the bottom here. Here we go. Accepts an object, which should be an anonymous type, gets to the properties, uh, gets the value of each one of those properties, and loops through them and populates the attributes collection of the late bound entity within the early bound entity. That way it actually will be able to populate itself. And I'll give you a little more example here at the end here. Generate option set enum properties. This is what I talked about before, where you've got early binding of your enums. So here I've got a pricing error code enum. There's a pricing error code property, which is your standard option set. But now I have an early bound enum that I could then help get some IntelliSense for, as well as prevent myself from referencing a different option set that isn't valid for that. And I'll show an example of that later as well. Use XRM client. This is for if you're going to use the XRM client that Microsoft provides that inherits from a different entity besides the normal entity. It inherits from the XRM client entity. You can go ahead and look at that URL to actually get a little more information on what it does and how it works. But just checking that will change will change quite a bit of the customizations of the generated code, and that's entirely done with that other provider. So I just enable that option for you there. Here's the relative path that you want to split these files in. So normally I include the toolbox. I check it into whatever branch that I'm currently working on. See down here I'm at sprint 10. And that branch will have a relative path in the branch to the actual entities. That way my use TFS to check out files works. And anyone that wants to generate the entities just goes ahead and takes the tool and opens it up and clicks the create all, and it'll spit out the entities exactly where they need to be. The CRM service context name is what actually generates the name to use for the service context. Option sets are very similar. You can skip option sets. You can also say create one file per option set, and then the path to spit the option sets out in. Same thing with options. If you're using 2011 and you don't have actions, this won't actually show up when you connect to that instance. So don't worry about it. It works perfectly fine. It won't do anything if your CRM instance doesn't support it. All right, so those are all the examples of what everything does. And if you want to generate each one's separately, you can use the button on each tab. Create option sets, create actions, create entities. Okay. And if you forget what these things do, this is kind of a helpful help text to be able to do that, as well as everything that's listed out on the home page here. Let's go ahead and look at an example of using this. So here's a standard code to go ahead and get all of the quotes that are using UPS and get the ship to address and the name of the quote. The first thing that's annoying with this is an option set. If this is null, you get an error, and you've got to convert this to an int, and no bueno, not much fun. So using the generate option set enum properties, you have the option to have the enum here. So I deleted the value of enum. This is of type shipping method code, and rather than the int, now it's actually that enum type. And if you don't know what enum type, it actually should be, since this is a nullable type, you have to do dot value, and now you get your IntelliSense for what your actual property values are, rather than having to hunt around for the int value. And we can set the equal because I'm looking for just UPS, and if it's null, it will be false and work just the way I want it to work. And again, this on the back end is converting it and then just storing it the same way as the option set is. So it's always going to be in sync with that option set. So we set the enum. Here's another issue here. Let's say we want to take this and we want to make it a method that we can call from elsewhere. So you might select this normally in Visual Studio and say, hey, give me a new method here. Not returns an iQueryable. Well, okay, that's fine, except I have no idea what this is. It also doesn't know the type, because this is an anonymous type that's being returned. That's not what I want at all. What if I try just selecting this one? Does that give me anything different? Can't do that, actually. So that, I can't call that from anywhere and know what it is. So the way that you get around that normally is you say, okay, new quote. And now in the quote, you do name equals name. And excuse the bad indenting. But you should get the idea that, okay, now it sets all these values, it's a quote, and now when I try to make a method, it's going to return the actual iQueryable of quote. Well, that's a whole lot better than what we had before. And generally, if you want to make sure you don't have any unintended side effects, you probably want to list that. Okay, so that's great. Nothing bad there, except it's kind of dumb we had to type these same names twice. Also, if I ever wanted to do, let's say modified, oop, get my IntelliSense here. Create an on. Let's go back to modified on. Modified on. Get an error. Modified on is a read-only field. I can't set it. Therefore, I can't return the quote if I want the modified on. I could do the whole thing, but then I'm going to return all the attributes of quote. I only want to retrieve a few, make that column set as small as possible to be as efficient on the CRM side of things. So this is where the generate anonymous type constructors comes in handy. So now, wrapping this in that, that'll actually work. It'll go through and populate these internally, so I won't have to worry about the read-only attribute issues. It's going to be in part of the constructor itself, and when that finishes running, it's going to return that quote object, and it's going to have that modified on value in it. So that's a win. Now we can go look at some of the instances of partial classes, how they might be helpful. So rather than having this method here, let's say I want it in the actual quote. So my hierarchy, I've got entities, quote. I created an entity extensions folder. You can name it whatever you want, or you can put it in the same folder. But it has the same namespace. Partial class, rather than private, public. Now I go back to program. Look at that. Now I've got a little more object-oriented programming, and I got one place to put all of my logic involving quote in the quote class itself. Since it's a partial class, I won't ever have to worry about the generator overriding any of the changes. It'll just work. Same thing with this. Let's say we want to make that a method. Let's go ahead and we'll call that get ship to info. Okay. Rather being here, let's put it back in here. Go ahead and paste, make it public. It doesn't need to be static anymore. I won't even pass that in. And now, I'm actually getting a little more business object-oriented programming again, where I have methods on my actual objects. So those are an example of how to clean up the code, the power of using those enum generators and the constructor generators, and then examples of how to use partial classes to your advantage. Let's go over anything else that I may have skipped. I already talked about generating the enum option sets. It sorts the option sets alphabetically. This is very helpful for comparing environments, because by default they get created in the order in which they were added to CRM. So that's very helpful. We talked about the anonymous type object constructors. We talked about the debugger non-user code, so it won't step into those generated code. Talked about the enum set already. Talked about creating only specific entities or specific option sets. We did the per file or per entity, or all in one entities file. Same thing with option sets and actions. Talked about overriding. All settings are stored in a separate XML config file for ease of use when sharing settings. All these settings are in this dlib early bound generator.settings.xml. This file is created whenever you go ahead and generate entities. It's saved at that point in time. And anytime you get a new version, it won't overwrite your changes. It'll just add to them. So you don't have to worry about losing any of your settings if you get a new version down. And they're stored there, so you can check those into TFS or whatever source control you have and share them amongst everybody on your team. Okay. Shell's out. We talked about that, and now you can actually run that command line and make it a part of your automated build. It ensures that any option set values, like if you had a name of option set with a text label of first or #1 or OK, these are all invalid C# names, and by default would get created with errors, and you have to manually update it each time. This ensures that the tool actually will make sure those are actual all valid names. It will automatically check out any auto-generated files from CFS. Talked about the organization service context, and it can be run directly from the command line as a part of the build process. So those are all the features and all the settings to control those features. It's extremely configurable. Um, if you have any questions, um, please feel free to add some discussions in here, or any issues, or any suggestions of what to do to make it better. So um, hopefully that was informative, and you can go on generating your early bound entities and making your life a whole lot faster.